research country. This conference was scheduled for the last week because of some small health problems that Bogdana had. Now she's perfectly well, as you can see. So at the last minute, we have to cancel it. But now she's ready to speak and to tell us about this fascinating subject. Bogdana, she's now a postdoctoral research fellow in our institute. She's working in a project trying to appeal and to know about the use of arrowheads in the origins of the Neolithic and how during the transfer of the movement of these populations across Anatolia and the Aegean and to the west, how this population changed their habits related to hunting and how this could affect the hunting technology and so on. So Bogdana, she has a PhD degree from the University of Tübingen and Istanbul University, and now she's welcome here, and I think that we're wishing to hear her, so I let you with the conference. Hi, Bogdana, how are you?
Thank you very much, Juanjo. So hello, everybody, and thank you for attending today, which is the second round of the same lecture. And I really wish to apologize for the last week that we canceled last minute because of the little health problems, but I hope today it will be much better. And I would like to thank the organizers from the ACD group for doing this terming again today, and also for the really warm welcome at the Spanish National Research Council. I just arrived 2 months ago. Actually, no, I'm in Turkey, but in any case, I just started the project, and you can imagine that I won't be having any new results from the postdoctoral project on user analysis to present today. But I will be focusing on the results of my previous PhD and after PhD projects, which are dealing mainly with the Western Anatolia, and also from the reason that Western Anatolia is a very important part in the new postdoctoral project in Spain. So I'm just gonna try to share my screen. Okay, works. Oh, okay, sorry, that's a different thing. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we could.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect. And I'm sorry. Just a second. Okay. I think you can see it now. Yeah. So practically, this is the first talk of me being a member of the new institute, and although we are starting with a new thing, I would like to tell you about the results from the previous projects, and to tell you what we discovered by dealing with the question of lithics and neolithizations in Western Anatolia during the 7th millennium of BC. And I think that many of you know this map, and many new talks are actually concerning the onset and development of the Neolithic start with this map, which shows you a different timing and paths of the spread of farming outside of the formation area, where the domestication of crops and animals took place. So today we focus on Western Anatolia. I tried to outline it here briefly, with catching also other regions, and on the right, on the map on the right, you can also see sites in focus of today's talk. So we're focusing on Western Anatolia, but also Aegean, where you can see the development of the village way of life with domesticates across the 7th millennium BC and not earlier. So over the past decade, many new studies concerning different aspects of the Neolithic were carried out, focusing on more or less general topic, but in particular built environment, domestication, pottery and lithic production. And if we can summarize everything that has been investigated over the past decade, very briefly, the Neolithic appears in this wide area in the first half of the 7th millennium BC, with tiny bit or sometimes even lack of pottery, with all domesticated species, apart from pigs in northwestern Anatolia, with extreme variety of building techniques, and finally, as it was seeming to be the case so far, with a homogeneous picture regarding the production and use of cheap stone tools. Different teams have been excavated sites in 3 major regions. This is Northwest Anatolia with sites around Marmara and Thrace, and a couple of recent sites further south, such as Bilecik, Başlıyevler. I'm sorry that I used kind of old maps or published maps, so I don't have all the new sites in the map as well. And so next to Northwest Anatolia, we have Southwest Anatolia, if I may say, with a concentration of sites in the Lakes district, and Central West Anatolia around modern town of Izmir. Unfortunately, it is also important to mention that, especially in the past few years, we occasionally don't have a particular consensus in terminology use and even in chronology, which are in particular regarding the start of the Neolithic already from 7000 BC. Why I think we should not forget and be aware of the flat line in the calibration curve between 7000 and 6700, emphasized in the work of Bernie Weininger, Maxim Brami, Agatha Reingruber, and others, which does not enable us to talk about the first few centuries of the millennia with high precision when it comes to radiocarbon dating. And then another topic that we are not reaching particular consensus in is the terminology, where we have a few disagreements about terming earliest phases of the Neolithic occupation. In Western Anatolia, where we have different terms as initial, incipient, early, or even as ceramic and pre-pottery Neolithic. And I think we should be really careful about the last one. And it's very important because Western Anatolia practically sits in between Near East and Southeast Europe. But although the sites occasionally in the beginning, as I mentioned, do not show intensive use of pottery, we are sure that they know how to use pottery and the pottery exists there. We simply do not have, besides that, anything else that could be compared to this well-known and culturally defined ceramic phase in the Neolithic from the sites in Central Anatolia, like Ashiklu, for instance, or pre-pottery Neolithic further east. So these are some things that are kind of present in Western Anatolia, and then we're still dealing with different aspects of research, I guess. And then regarding lithics, a huge contribution of our Bulgarian and Turkish colleagues working in Marmara and Lakes district outlined the rather homogeneous character of lithic industries in the entire area, which are best denoted with a strong blade component in production, with pressure technique, with bullet cores, a constant obsidian supply and distribution, and particular set of tools, including circular scrapers, sickle blades, retouched blades, drills, but on the other hand, lack of burins and arrowheads, and with occasional presence of geometric microliths, in particular trapezes. And this was just to give you kind of a framework before I focus on each of these aspects. So kind of what was my orientation in the research in the past, I guess, 8 years or so, is to try to understand how lithics can inform us about the process of Neolithization in Western Anatolia. And by saying that, here I address not just the start of the Neolithic, but the formation and the development of the Neolithic as well. And so I had kind of, as I wrote on the poster in the little abstract, I had like 2 lines of research. One was to focus on a large data set from a single site in Western Anatolia in detail, where I was able to address technology in particular, and then moving to a bigger picture after my PhD by outlining different elements embedded in few aspects. So first is like technological aspect of production, second is the raw material procurement and use, and 3 is addressing typological issues though without use wear. And I started working on this topic when I started my PhD, and then continued in the framework of different follow-up studies afterwards. Initially, I was based in Istanbul, as Juanjo already said, but then moved to Vienna, where I was a member of research group of Barbara Horesh, where with a team we carried on studies in Western Anatolia, where we look at different aspects, and also then recently going into different areas as well to see how Western Anatolia kind of sits, as I said, between Near East and Southeast Europe. And on this map on the left, you can see 3 sites where the lithic analyses were conducted in detail by me and also another colleague, Michael Brandl, who was focusing on raw material studies. And you can see that the Çukurçi Huyuk here was the first study during my PhD. Ekşi Huyuk is still ongoing study, and where I've been looking at lithics from the 7th millennium as a direct comparison. I had this great opportunity to work also in Greece at the site of Valiambela with Professor Kotsakis, and this really opened up the horizons in understanding of Western Anatolia from kind of an Aegean perspective. After that, tracking the neolithization process in lithics also brought us to 2 more projects of the research group, one focusing on understanding the formation of the Neolithic in the central Zagros. Here we were surveying sites in western Iran, in central Zagros, which is the region with a very extremely early appearance of pressure technique, and was really valuable to look at this question. And then the second project, that was the most recent one, was in the Neolithic project with other colleagues working on pottery, raw materials, and built environment, which looks at Neolithic technological trajectories in the Balkans. So we kind of try to look at Western Anatolia from different perspectives, both in research and regional differences. So back on the focus, I told you that the first thing I was focusing on in my research was actually to try to address the origins of lithic technologies in Western Anatolia and the Aegean, and this was actually also how the PhD hypothesis was formed around. So when I started in 2012, sites in Marmara were best defined with the work of Ivan Gatsov and Petranka Nedelcheva, and then also Semra Balji, who clearly outlined the blade component in the Neolithic assemblages with an overall presence of bullet cores related to pressure flaking and pressure technique. So Southwest Anatolia was in contrast published only partially, also supporting this evidence from the north, where we have the presence of bullet cores in obsidian and chert. And then at the end, the central part of the coast, with this concentration of sites around Izmir, was practically unknown. We had 2 master and PhD ongoing theses for Yeşilova and Ege, and thanks to them, we also now know a lot more in detail about technology. And of course, in the past few years, we also have Ulucak published with other sites alongside Uğurlu that are telling us now more about this micro-regional perspective. So when we compare that, or when we put that on a wider level, there was a clear input by Catherine Pelez on Neolithic lithics in Greece, which we all intensively use, and of course a lot of things happening in the east that we know from central and southeast Anatolia and further Levantine corridor. So research background about pressure technique, which was visible from the Neolithic sites in Western Anatolia and Greece clearly from the beginning. In this map of Didier Bander, proposed in 2012, actually suggests that there are 2 main streams in the diffusion. And you can see that Western Anatolia was just marked on the map like Lake Pottery Neolithic here with 6,400, which was practically the date that was more or less known as the earliest back 10 years ago. You can see that this kind of the 6,400 is the onset of pressure technique in 2012. And what is, I think, most striking is that this evidence was primarily related with Central Anatolia, and so pressure technique appearing in Çatalhöyük. So I think that around 2012, practically everything outside of Greece in Western Anatolia was related to Central Anatolia, where not just the lithic technology, the origin of lithic technologies, but the origin of Neolithic kind of settlements was practically related to Central Anatolia and also a lot to Çatalhöyük itself. What became clear in the immediately following years is that there are also other early sites in Western Anatolia after few excavations bringing dates back to the first half of the 7th millennium between 2010 and 15. And on the other hand, for me, by looking at the origins of lithic technology, I was tightly related to understanding of what was happening before the Neolithic, as we did not have a single site which shows an kind of uninterrupted continuation in occupation from the previous period, either called Mesolithic or Epipaleolithic, not to enter this discussion here as well. In contrast to, again, what was very well known from Franti in Greece with this kind of continuation and discontinuation in lithic technology and occupation known from the work of Perles. So again, I apologize here for not marking the new survey in Bozburun in southwest Turkey, which was so now in particular important in looking at this pre-Neolithic sequence, despite this this kind of like interrupted lines which show question mark in terms of pre-Neolithic sequence, because the material comes from surveys and just small lithic collections. The regions marked in blue are extremely important for understanding the onset of the Neolithic in this wide area, and here practically very well-known Anatolian evidence from the caves and Epipaleolithic stuff, or at the same time stuff around Istanbul, in Istanbul area from Ağaçlı, particularly contributed in understanding of what is happening before the Neolithic, although always showing the evidence that was way earlier than 7th millennium. And here, this brings me to the work of Çiler Çilingirolu and her team in Karaburun Peninsula, which is practically like the most influential in this story for us, because the team discovered that we have the Mesolithic here, very clearly outlined through this flake-based industry, like in Greece. And I think the most influential result was that this part of Western Anatolia was actually, also part of this Aegean story in the Mesolithic. But again, from the new studies at Ulucak, at Çukurçi, together with Karaburun, we know that, again, in terms of technology, these two things have very little to do with each other. So we have pressure onset around 6,700, or maybe a little bit earlier in this part, but all the evidence from the survey showing obviously earlier dates. And then here I just tried to mark, but this is again very, very briefly and very general. Of course, we have a couple of outliers, but what we need to pay attention on is that in the 9th and 8th millennium, we have a large dichotomy in terms of technology, where on the west, in the Aegean, also partially now taking Western Anatolia, known from Karaburun and Bozburun, we have this flake-based industry without pressure technique, without bidirectional napping, and practically everything organized around flake production, versus these things on the east, which are independently or regardless whether it was a pressure technique or bidirectional and naviform method in production used most, we have a clear blade industries in the east. And this crazy dichotomy is kind of like completely synchronized when the 7th millennium takes place, where we practically have the spread of pressure technique outside of Southwest Asia towards west, and some sites which are acting like we are trying to call them pioneers with the earliest evidence, and then most of the sites in the second half of the 7th millennium getting pressure afterwards immediately. So this picture is again something that we don't understand in detail, because there is a chronological gap, and it's very difficult to address Western Anatolia in this particular sense, because there is no this continuation from the Mesolithic or from Epipaleolithic, like we have in Greece, or like we have on the beginning of Holocene in the East. So this brings me to the central part of the talk, and practically the site of Čukurčić, because I used it. It was a case study of my PhD, and I can show you a case study of how I was dealing with lithics there, and how now I perceive kind of this central Western Anatolian part. I think I don't need to introduce it in many details. Many of you already know for the site. The site was excavated until 2015 by Barbara Horesh, and it is located in the direct vicinity of ancient Ephesus, close to modern town of Izmir. And what is really interesting is that by reconstruction of this coastal line, we come up with a very different picture in the past, especially in the Neolithic, when the site was actually directly on the coast, with a direct access to the sea, and probably to the seafood as well, not just the sea as a sea, but also different aspects that were done visible and developed throughout the occupation. In terms of dating, we have the occupation throughout the entire 7th millennium, starting around 6700 BC, with these two defined phases as early and late Neolithic, with kind of a boundary at around 6500. This is not just a chronological boundary, it's also a boundary in different aspects of material culture expressions, and we can see it a lot through lithics, through pottery, and small finds as well. And so before we started focusing on lithics, pretty much from 2012, Čukurčić was already before that very known as a very peculiar site in terms of obsidian use that you can see here on this map was really abundant in contrast to other sites that were other contemporaneous sites in the region. And yeah, so enormous amounts of obsidian were actually acknowledged through different phases of occupation, from the Neolithic through Chalcolithic and Bronze Age. And it seems that the site was always procuring and getting obsidian in large amounts. And when I went into details and in counting during my PhD, you can see that during the excavations of six different phases of the Neolithic, we have around 18,000 pieces of obsidian and chert, with a very nicely gradual rise in the use of obsidian, as you can see down here. And practically what is striking here is that the but the first phase, the earliest phase of the Neolithic, is the only one that has only for us 33% of obsidian, while it immediately jumped over to almost 70% and then gradually raised until almost 90% throughout 700 or 800 years. And this is also very interesting to follow in kind of in line or in parallel with technology, because of course the main question appearing after the different use of obsidian was it influencing technology, and to what scale? And also what is important to realize here is that when the obsidian was used in a small amount, we also had the use of rock crystal or clear quartz, which is kind of lost afterwards. And here, not to bother you too much about details about raw material studies that were done in close collaboration with Michael Brandl, Maria Martinez, and people who, of course, helped us analyzing it as Professor Pernitska, Lisa Pelušek. You can see that I did first a macroscopic study inspired by people in Istanbul University, especially Nurcan Kayacan, Semra, and Chiller, and did this macroscopic a kind of differentiation to see whether I can get to some little sampling strategy that can be used for further provenance studies, because after having 15,000 of obsidian, it was clearly obvious that I cannot sample a lot for the chemical analysis. And there was really, like, when you work with Milos obsidian and Central Anatolian, there is a clear difference in color and in structure, I think. And you can see that this there is a lot of this matte obsidian from other pictures. I think this one, you can see how much of this Melian obsidian was very evident from the beginning. But then we also had different obsidian that was probably procured from Central Anatolia or even from Yali, that were afterwards confirmed in analysis. In terms of non-obsidian nappable raw materials, thanks to Michael Brandl and Maria Martinez, we now know that there are different kinds of jasper, cherts, radiolarites present on the site, which were of course used not just in lesser scale, but also differently. And finally, the rock crystal was, just as I said, used in the beginning in a very different way, and it might be something particular to this very first community settling on the site. And this, just briefly, of course, it's not published yet, is the part of the PhD thesis that is going in publication soon, I hope. What we can see here, and it is very particular for Čukurići, is that from the beginning of the site, we normally, both in obsidian and you will see here in non-obsidian, we have concentration on some sources, and in this case in obsidian we have just the use of Melian sources in the beginning, and I think in the second phase we sampled all of obsidian pieces and just one Nenezi-Daso Cappadocian obsidian appeared. And it means that in the first at least 100 or 200 years, Čukurići community was obtaining obsidian just from Melos. Afterwards, this grows. Here, I think you should take it a little bit like an outlier because only few pieces are present. And then, of course, you get another Cappadocian obsidian into use, and also Yalu. And in terms of cherts, not very similar picture, but kind of like a similar tendency, is that we have a variety in use of raw materials from the very start of the settlement. And this is very important for defining the Archaeolithic technologies, because it's obvious that they, prior to settling on the site, that they were kind of knowing the region, which then kind of, yeah, the variety is like increasing towards the end of the occupation. So super briefly summarize technology from Čukurići after I was telling you about raw materials, is that in this early phases from 6.7 to 6.5, we have a kind of a similar obsidian and chert production, because we have the appearance of pressure blade making from the very start in both materials. But once obsidian kind of rose in the assemblages, then we have pressure technique being completely dominant in obsidian, but a little bit of a flake-oriented technology in chert. So you can see this kind of technological switch as well between the early and late Neolithic as the obsidian grow in amounts. And in terms of typology, I think just because we have more pieces later on and this kind of small assemblages in the beginning, we can see like a greater variety of retouch tools in the later phases as well. And this is the same thing practically in a photo, where I can show you how a very common or typical assemblage from Čukurići looks like, where you take out the context either of a house or of an external area in the settlement. There will be a lot of obsidian, mainly concentrated on blades, and way less chert products, which are always larger, kind of flake-based, and particularly different. And what we can say for both raw materials, despite the difference in amounts, is that on-site production on both raw materials, obsidian and all non-obsidian, was present from the very start. So we have cores, we have core maintenance elements, we have rejuvenation, preparation of cores on-site, and the napping of main products. Of course, use and discard as well. The only thing that is missing on the site is the presence of these large obsidian blocks, and I think this is very logical because of the procurement from the large distance. And if I can now just focus on blade production and try to summarize in two pictures, kind of I would love to use this schematic representation of core reduction by Osamu Meda and experimental core representation by Jacques Pellegrin, where you can see practically two different things. One is the reduction, which is practically standardized reduction of smaller blades leading eventually to the bullet-shaped cores, which we have in an extremely low percentage. And what is actually the particular case of Čukurić is that we have this frontal reduction and the wedge-shaped cores with the reduction of rather larger or bladelets and blades and not microblades. And the pressure technique that was used most commonly was the one from the sitting position and from the standing position with a long crutch. We also have some, I think it's too much into details for the non-lithic specialists, but it's also important to say that we have these very large blade fragments, and that would probably testify the use of lever pressure in blade production. So in terms of these larger blades, I can say that, of course, the majority of blade fragments that we encounter on the site are the section of fragments between 3 and 4 centimeters, despite the fact that we also have large blades. But what is very clear from even the small fragments is that we have an initial production of larger blades, which were intentionally sectioned into smaller one for the purposes of use. Also, when you see the next picture, it will become clear why the larger or the longer, thinner, slender blades were not used as whole. And here I intentionally put something that looks like a bullet core because, as I say, we really don't have many of them. So, of course, the talk cannot go on without presenting this really, I would say, spectacular find of the cache of long blades found next to the wall within the house at around 6,400 BC. There was 18 blades stored together with a shaft straightener, and none of them was used, none of them was broken. And in the same house on 2 previous floors, we found other long blades which were practically either sectioned intentionally or broken. So we can see that this cache kind of brought very final products which were preserved completely or entirely and then stored together. And it is very clear to imagine that this is the final product of something that was going on either for longer period or was part of the similar practice of production of long blades. It was not just a unique thing, despite the fact that it was in the cache. And here I would like to show you when I said that the long crutch and from standing position of pressure technique was used the most. By excavating this cache and also going into details of production from each single blade, it is very striking to realize that not all of the blades in the cache were made by pressure, but also indirect percussion, and they were also shorter and thicker, which means that they were probably using indirect percussion in the beginning of detaching large cores, kind of to shape it and to make it more symmetrical, and then would continue to production of pressure. And after presenting you this cache, sorry. So we were looking at similar practices, and not just caches, but similar practices on depositing long blades made of obsidian, and we didn't encounter anything similar in the entire Aegean area, but always something that belongs to PPN context, and based on this evidence, alongside the evidence of domestication of the use of seafaring and particular tool sets incorporating both possible projectiles, shaft straighteners, and other small finds. We published this paper in 2015, suggesting an maritime colonization model for the central part of Western Anatolian coast, which would probably, I don't know if many people would agree still, and the things are changing, luckily, I guess. That is probably in parallel to the spread of the Neolithic outside of Central Anatolia, further north or even north and west. So this study was was having a follow-up study, and I think I'm not really allowed to talk a lot about this because it's unpublished, and I don't have the final results yet. But as you can see here in the very tiny picture and on the right, after dealing with the origins of lithic technology in the central part of Western Anatolia, I also tried to look at different areas and in this very early sites, together with colleagues from the UCL in London, working on modeling techniques and trying to see if this typical diffusion model that was also used for the spread of diffusion of pottery production on a very global level is actually fitting or not. And we have some really promising results that I think go very well with the distribution of obsidian, which is the next part of the talk, and which is very important to see in parallel with the lithic production. So practically what was seen from the Mesolithic in Greece is that we have obsidian used in different on different sites, either in surveys and excavations in different proportions. And during that time, we practically don't have anything known for Western Turkey for 9th and 8th millennium on this scale. But again, like it is for the pressure, when it comes to 7th millennium BC, and I think here something later as well, this beautiful map from Marina Milić and her great work really contributed a lot in understanding how obsidian from Melos and Cappadocia were used in Western Anatolia. And I will just try to address this thing very briefly in order to try to summarize different evidences from Western Anatolia, not just focusing now on the central part. And here, although I think Čukurići should be probably corrected because there is even more obsidian and it's gradually changing, we can see kind of two different perspectives with the Marmara sites, which are practically obtaining a lot more obsidian from Anatolian sources, and the sites over here procuring obsidian from Melian sources, from the two sources on Melos. So this little dichotomy, first of all, I didn't work a lot on that, but practically after influential studies of Catherine Perles suggesting that in the Neolithic of Greece, we have a very peculiar scenario with the possible itinerant nappers. I was trying to contrast this evidence with Western Anatolia and to see whether a similar thing could fit or not. And I think in the new paper of Neir Bostanji and Erkan Fidan about Bilecik, they are trying to do something similar and see whether the itinerant nappers are also present in another parts in Western Anatolia, not just in Greece. So for me, the result of PhD thesis present here is actually that at Čukurići, not just because of big or crazily large amounts of obsidian at the site, but also from the technological aspect of production, we can see a different pattern. And while Perles is suggesting itinerant nappers based on the evidence from Greece, which is practically supporting that the local communities are having obsidian just procured in ready-made products and they are not locally producing it. In Western Anatolia in particular, at Čukurići, and I think now on many other sites, we can see a local production without doubt. So maybe not involvement of these large obsidian blocks, maybe they were initially shaped on the outcrops, but in any case, we have local production of obsidian in many different sites. We see that from the presence of cores, from the presence of blades and debris as well. And going again back a little bit to Čukurići, I think from the amounts and technological aspects from shaping of cores and from this very particular knowledge of pressure technique from the very start of the settlement, we suggested both in my PhD and in this paper by Christoph Schwal et al., including other raw materials, is that Čukurići had or was involved in direct procurement of obsidian as well. Was not just something that was happening around and they would sometimes get obsidian, but was rather involved directly. And maybe this is not the case for other sites in Western Anatolia, but in any case, it is really contrasting the evidence of these itinerant networks. And also, just to add, by working in Greece on the site of Paliambela, I realized one very important thing, and discussed it with Michi Brandl, is that in Greece, in contrast to Western Anatolia, we have much less, the assemblages are much less in the number of artifacts. So Western Anatolian assemblages in particular, in contrast to Northwestern Greece, are very abundant in the number of artifacts. The obsidian is abundant, more or less on some sites more, on some sites less, but also local production is evident with pressure and without pressure on obsidian, and not on many of the sites. And this is not the case for Greece. So I guess that we have a big technological dichotomy, as well as the raw material use and procurement one. And I try to summarize a couple of these things by here, of course, just focusing on Northwest Greece and the sites around Thessaloniki, and in different parts of Western Anatolia, which kind of show different use of obsidian, sometimes use of quartz, especially in this part, and then use of this different white-spotted honey flint, especially in the area emphasized by Gatsov and Nedelcheva, and then afterwards by Denis Guilbeault at Urlu, which would actually fit a little bit more towards Greek evidence, also in terms of use of obsidian. And then I try to look on different technological aspects and at tool sets. So now, in order to summarize, so we can see two different kind of things in terms of use of obsidian, where here in the Marmara area, we have the use of Cappadocian obsidian. Here, of course, everything is Melos, and Southwest and Western Anatolia more Melian obsidian. And besides this kind of dichotomy, in terms of tool sets, I didn't want to talk a lot about typology, but we also have the presence of trapezes in Greece and Marmara region, which could have possibly been used for hunting, but we don't know yet. And we have some little appearance, at least, of projectiles in the region in the central west part of Anatolia. So besides this obsidian use and procurement aspects and tool sets, we have two very clearly different areas, or at least a little border or barrier between. And when I go back to technology, because I think this is where the biggest source of information is coming from, I have to say that after the initial investigation in Marmara and Southwest Turkey, now when we add the sites around Izmir region, we can actually see not just geographically different, but culturally very different areas in terms of production of blades and use of pressure technique. And if you remember, this massive influence of a small production of small blades in the Marmara is contrasting the evidence from here, which is not so much related to bullet cores, but to conical cores, of course, due to the production of larger blades as well. So we have actually a different practices in use of pressure technique that go alongside the other differences, which brings me to the conclusions. And here on the left, I just outline what is the summary of everything. So the onset of the Neolithic occurs in the first part of the 7th millennium, and Neolithic technology, pressure technique, spreads alongside first farmers into Western Anatolia and the Aegean. We can see from the raw materials in particular that there is an intensification of exchange networks after 6500, where many of the sites start participating in the network, and with that also the diversification in the use of non-local raw materials. And probably this can be visible also outside of lithics, but in small finds as well. One of the little outcomes of one of the postdoctoral projects I had before this at Koç University just recently was that this obsidian exchange kind of triggered a rapid spread of technical know-how. And I could imagine that with the exchange of obsidian that was constant, also exchange of different aspects of production of blades could be happening as well. And finally, something that I would maybe like to publish with our Bulgarian colleagues later on is this forming of regional identities and different cultural affinities influencing the appearance of at least two cultural traditions in production and use of stone tools. And this is actually bringing me to future directions. And besides the things that should be published from this modeling project, we have these geographical and cultural entities with clear outliers in three major regions. I think the sites of Urlu, Girmeler, and Bilecik can be extremely important here to address this little kind of not matching into wider picture sites. Then we have these cultural borders and barriers in exchange of raw materials and technical know-how that we practically don't really understand very well yet. And I was trying to deal with the questions of specialization in lithic production in Western Anatolia, and to be honest, I couldn't go into detail with that because there is a standardization or even hyper standardization at Çukurçyhuyuk, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm not sure that this would really fit to the specialization models that we know from the Near East and in adjacent regions. And finally, the first thing that is a future direction here is to conduct more analysis and studies on tool function and typology. So to look at lithics in the context of botanical and zoarchaeological data, which brings me to a little promotion of the project in Barcelona, which is a new research framework combining the evidence from useWare studies from three different areas in the Near East and Western Anatolia and Southeast Europe. And we'll look at kind of revisiting the patterns of use of some particular tools, in particular these trapezes in arrowheads. And maybe by doing that, we could also more clearly define this potential cultural barrier and two cultural entities of Western Anatolian Neolithic in terms of lithics. So this project will be done together with Juanjo Ibanez and the team and Lionel Gorichon in Nice, who will be assisting us and helping with zoarchaeological training in zoarchaeological data sets. And yeah, I hope to keep you updated with these project results as soon as possible. And with this, I would like to finish and thank you everyone for your attention and colleagues that are stated here and many others for the support in the past 10 years.
Thank you very much, Bogdana, for this very interesting talk, full of information and ideas.
Hope it was not too packed.
No, very nice. So yeah, we have some questions. Sylvia, I would like to ask something, please, Sylvia, and after Sylvia, Stephanie. Sylvia, please, come on.
No, I just I just was clapping. Congratulations.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe is there any question for Bogdana?
Bogdana, thank you so much. It was very interesting to see your final results of, not final, but the results until here. And for me, it was very, very interesting. The part you said that in Greece, they have like a kind of different cultural development than in Western Anatolia. And might this be the explanation why in Thrace or in Bulgaria we have such a different tool producing than the one across the Bosphorus around the Marmara. So for me this was really a very nice and striking conclusion of this lecture. So I think that we just need to go further and to study together this part because it's really a big question why the pressure technology didn't cross the Bosphorus and went to Bulgaria or to Thrace, and maybe really the answer is in Greece. This is our answer, yeah. So I'm very happy to hear that, and
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to see your results.
Thank you, Pepa. I must say that I learned lithics from Pepa and Ivan Gatsov, so it was a pleasure of me.
Thank you, Bogdana. Thank you.
Yes. No, I thank you very much for observing this. It was just emerging as a thing that after doing this small postdoc at Koç University, where I looked at obsidian exchange networks and also editing a book with Alice and Denny on obsidian networks and discussing a lot on that. And I think what I had in PhD but was kind of hidden was that we have this really a big difference, and that Greece is important, and especially when I was looking then later on at Urlu and in the island evidence and trace, as you were publishing a long time ago already, that there is this big difference between Marmara and trace. It seems that there is a weird line.
Yeah, absolutely.
That goes with raw materials and technology together.
Absolutely. And also the map where you were showing the differences between the pressure which is coming from the South Anatolia towards the Marmara, and the difference in the technology in Western Anatolia and Aegean. I totally agree that there was some kind of corridors concerning. And they split it this way. So it was very interesting to see also your results.
Thank you.
I'm sure that we are going to have more questions after this talk to discuss next time we see each other.
Yeah.
So, more questions or comments? Bogdana, I would like to ask you about this dichotomy in the core area of the bipolar technology and pressure nap technology, and how maybe in the late 8th millennium or in the middle PPMB or late PPMB, pressure napping starts to be used in other parts of the Levant, in the Levant, but this is not the case for maybe was not so clear for bipolar technology. There is no real exchange, parallel exchange, but it seems that the influence is coming from east to west. What do you think about that? Is something related to the spread of obsidian from the east, or some ideas about that?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of things with modeling the pressure technique spread, and this was really not clear because we have like some nice line and then outliers, and then again. So it was, I don't think it can be seen as a linear thing. I think the dichotomy is really interesting, and what is even more striking is that some areas just don't take pressure ever, like Cyprus, like Israel, part of Levant, and there is just no pressure until, I don't know, very late, or until it's just distributed from, for example, we have it in PPMB, in distribution of blades from Kaletepe. There is obvious distribution of those blades, but not local production. So this is really interesting. And then I was thinking about spread of farming and sickle blades related to the production of regular blades. But again, the thing is already appearing in way earlier in the Mesolithic, and it's not necessarily related to farming. So sometimes even, I don't know, in Western Anatolia, sometimes they wouldn't even use pressure blades because they're too thin, but something else. So
what about the relationship with hunting tools, arrowheads? Because arrowheads and projectiles should be very different with blanks, with arrowheads made with blanks coming from bipolar or by pressure napping.
Yes, I think that probably a small key is also like to look at Zagros area, because we don't have particular projectiles like we have in the rest of Southwest Asia, but there are these oblique truncations, or how we call them, which might have been used for these purposes, and they are on and I think they are related to pressure blade making. And if we have, I don't know, Southeast Turkey, I think the sites that are combining bidirectional and pressure, the arrowhead's always related to bidirectional. So probably the blanks are not very suitable. And when we have just pressure and no bidirectional, then they're obviously modified on these blanks, but are not very regular or well-known bipolar things.
Interesting.
Maybe we can combine in our project also these things from technology.
Yes. Any other comments or questions?
I can. Hi, Bogdana. I would like to ask you something that it's related with your topic, but in another zone, that is the Middle Mediterranean. Why do you think the transmission of this knowledge related to the obsidian, such as the pression technique, is interrupted? Because in the Western Mediterranean, with the arrival of the Neolithic, we have also obsidian from the Occidental Mediterranean, but it's never napped by pressure. So have you any idea about this?
Yeah, I think that it's just for this specific area, or like wider Aegean basin, because also I think with the with further north, with the Carpathians and so on, it's also not the case. So I guess it's something to do with this. I don't know if one always calls it like this, with spread of farming into Western Anatolia, and then we have like a new thing, and that we like to investigate now through our project. I think this area is really defined through obsidian, through new technique, and through onset of farming just outside of Near East, and I think this might have something. I don't know, maybe it's just an internal thing, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be like this in other places. What I was thinking with spread of knowledge in line with exchange of obsidian is just that I think that people were probably communicated more effectively when they also had to exchange the obsidian, because in the beginning there were just new settlements forming and then slowly developing on a very regional basis. And then when we have this is what I see, at least in the Aegean, when we have the use of different sources. So it's not just Milos. Now they start introducing Cappadocian sources. They even go, I don't know, at the moment we don't have anything from Southeast Anatolia, but we know that in the 7th millennium, this really large networks again kind of got established. Then we have this intensification of movements, of contacts. And I guess this is also bringing the knowledge. But when we were looking in Serbia, in the project that we are doing in the Balkans, it was also not very clear that the pressure it's like a rule for getting the pressure into it, backed up from the raw material exchange. I think it's very common for the Aegean, but doesn't look like this outside.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Bogdana. Any questions? Last chance for questions or comments. Thank you very much, Bogdana, for your conference.
Thank you all for coming second time.
Yeah, you have a lot of followers, yes. So yes, we this is the last conference of the year. And for the next one, Xavier, do we have any schedule for the next conference? I don't remember.
Yes, I was looking for now. Next speech is in 19th of January. It's Maria Carme Belarte from the Catalan Institute of Classical Archaeology, but I don't have the topic here.
Okay. So thank you everybody for being here. And I hope we will meet you again in forthcoming conferences. Bye. See you.
Merry
Nice
Christmas.
holiday.